Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our second visa options in horticulture webinar. We had a similar webinar in 2023. However, there have been several changes in the visa landscape since then. And we know from our recent surveys that workforce shortages and changes to schemes such as the PALM scheme have increased the demand for other visa options. It is important to note that whilst the information presented here today is accurate, migration settings change, particularly given the current review, and therefore it is important to check visa conditions on a regular basis. For those not familiar with the BIRO acronym, it stands for Business, Industry and Regional Outreach. The Department of Home Affairs introduced BIRO officers to boost skilled migration liaison with business, industry, government agencies at all levels and regional Australia stakeholders. BIRO is engaged directly with stakeholders across the country to help fill workplace needs where positions cannot be filled by Australian workers. The BIRO network assists stakeholders with understanding skilled visa programs and appropriate visa options to fill employment gaps. I would like to welcome Yvette Adams, who is the Assistant Director for the Queensland Business, Industry and Regional Outreach team. Yvette is also the National Lead for the agricultural industry within the BIRO network. Yvette has worked for the Department of Home Affairs for over 20 years and has had extensive experience in visa processing teams and stakeholder engagement roles. Having grown up in regional New South Wales, Yvette has a strong interest in regional Australia and is passionate about the role in the Department of Home Affairs about assisting regional communities in the area of critical workforce shortages. Yvette is also joined by Steve and Natalie. And Yvette will go through her presentation, but she'll also make some comments about asking questions through the presentation and at the end. So thank you, Yvette. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. Just want to check if everyone can hear me. If there's a thumbs up or if there's any issues, just let me know. I'll just get our, thanks guys, appreciate that. I'll just get the presentation up for you. Just give me a moment. Now I'm going to turn my camera off as well. We'll ask everyone to turn their cameras and their microphones off for the presentation. It'll just help teams be a little bit more or a little bit less fragile while we go through the presentation. So I'll turn my okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Lucy and the team at AUSVEG for organising today's visa information session. As mentioned, my name's Yvette Adams and I'm the Assistant Director for the Queensland Business, Industry and Regional Outreach team within the Department of Home Affairs. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet. I would also like to pay respect to the elders of this land, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today. I want to introduce my two colleagues joining me today, Natalie Walsh, who's our Assistant Director in our Victorian office, and Steve Lanier, our Assistant Director in our WA office. Both Nat and Steve will be assisting with any questions you have during the presentation via the Q&A function. We have a large amount of information to get through today, and we welcome any questions during the presentation to be submitted by that Q&A function, and both Nat and Steve will do their best to answer these questions. And if we have any time at the end of the presentation, which we should, we can also then take some questions verbally. As you're likely aware, Australia's migration program is currently going through significant reforms, which are part of the Department of Home Affairs migration strategy. As part of this strategy, we will continue to see major changes to current visa programs over the coming 6 to 18 months. I'll talk a little bit more about the strategy in this session, and I'll also touch on some of the current visa programs and products which are available for employing overseas workers in areas of critical workforce shortages. Today's session will cover a range of topics, including visa products that are available to assist employers to meet workforce shortages where they cannot find staff locally, a variety of semi to highly skilled visa options, the migration strategy, as well as available resources located on the department's website to assist Australian businesses in employing overseas workers. To start off, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the role of the Business Industry and Outreach team, otherwise known as BIROs, as Lucy mentioned, especially for those that may not have met our team as yet. The role of the BIRO officer is primarily to promote the various visa options that Australia offers to businesses seeking to employ an overseas workforce so they can make informed migration decisions to fill employment gaps where Australian workers are not available. We provide a platform to communicate complex migration information and ensure our stakeholders are kept informed of changes and announcements and understand new initiatives to inform their recruitment strategies. Our engagement role is also an information gathering role to guide future policy directions and initiatives. We seek feedback regarding skill shortages impacting business or regions and how well the migration program is supporting business and industry needs. We're a national network which covers all of Australia, and I'll provide a list of our network contacts at the end of the session for those interested to contact their local BIRO team. It's also worth mentioning that as BIROs, we cannot give advice or assistance on individual cases, and we cannot complete applications or assist with completing applications. Furthermore, we cannot advise on which visa a potential applicant should apply for. After you do your own research and have looked at the information on our website, if you feel you need individually tailored advice, you may want to consider engaging a registered migration agent. If so, we would encourage you to look at the Office of the Migration Agents Registration Authority website for further information, and we will talk about this a little bit later in the session. The migration strategy was released on 11 December last year, and the department's visa programs are going through significant reforms and changes which will have some impacts on the programs and products currently available. The strategy outlines the government's vision for building a migration system that delivers for workers, businesses and all Australians to ensure the migration system is best targeted to build on Australia's economic prosperity and security. The migration strategy will remove barriers in the system that prevent skilled migrant workers from coming to Australia. The 5 key objectives outlined in the strategy include 1. Raising living standards for Australians. 2. Ensuring a fair go in the workplace. 3. Building stronger Australian communities. 4. Strengthening international relationships by building stronger economic and social connections with our region and international partners. And 5. Making the system work by being fast, efficient and fair for migrants and employers. All changes under the migration strategy will be made available on the department's website as they are released. Supporting the way forward are 8 key actions for reform. It's important to note that these actions are not a quick fix, as some will take years to complete, but they will lead to substantial and lasting change. We're not going to go into detail on all 8 actions today, however, I will touch on a few that may be of particular interest. The first key action of the migration strategy is building a new temporary skilled migration system to address skills needs and enhance worker mobility. Introducing the Skills in Demand visa and delivering amendments to the existing skilled visa framework where necessary. Migration planning and simplification is another key action under the migration strategy. Short-term planning restricts the migration program's ability to deliver strategic outcomes for Australia's economy and population, and a move to a multi-year planning model has been proposed to extend the migration planning horizon and better enable coordination to meet strategic, structural and long-term challenges. A long-term outlook will also better align population, infrastructure, housing and essential services planning. Another key action is visa simplification. With around 100 visa products, many users find the current system difficult to navigate. A simpler system is essential to enhance Australia's attractiveness as a tourism, education and migration destination of choice and improves Australia's international standing. The migration strategy outlines a number of indicative timeframes for consultations and reforms. Some of these are listed on the screen, with some of the consultations being open now. We're not going to go into detail or through these in detail. However, please take note of the dates of those that are of interest to you. And further information is available on the department's website on the migration strategy, the at a glance and the action plan documents. I will mention here, though, that there is a virtual consultation session on Tuesday next week, specifically for the horticulture sector. This consultation session is on the evaluation of the Working Holiday Maker program and regional migration settings to support Australia. I forwarded the details of this session to Lucy, and if you are interested in attending, please make sure you register to the event. I believe that it was in your weekly newsletter this week, the details. So if you're interested in attending that session next Tuesday, please register as per the details in the newsletter. We're now going to move to current visa options and products available, noting that these may change over the coming months as part of the reforms. All the information I'll provide from here on will focus on some of the current visa options available and other products and useful tools for business if they wish to employ overseas workers. This slide lists some visa pathways that enable migrants to work in Australia. Some of these visa subclasses require an employer to sponsor the visa applicant, such as the Temporary Skilled Shortage Visa Subclass 482, or the Skilled Employer Sponsored Regional Visa Subclass 494 programs. There are also independent or standalone visas where no sponsorship is required on the employer's part, such as a Temporary Graduate Visa Subclass 485. Commonly used visas are the Working Holiday Maker Visa Subclass 417 and 462, and the Temporary Skilled Shortage Visa Subclass 482. Not listed here are student visas, which we know can also assist in providing a seasonal workforce when available. Information on all of the visas listed on the screen can be found on the department's website at the link listed there. There are a number of skilled visa products available for those with a higher skilled occupation. The Skilled Migration Program, which includes 4 visa categories, are listed on the screen. Under the Skilled Migration Program, we have temporary skilled, permanent skilled, employer-sponsored, state-sponsored and independent skilled visas. We'll look at the employer-sponsored migration streams in a little more detail in the next slide, but with regards to the Skilled Migration Program, the key considerations in determining visa options that may be available and most appropriate are whether there are possibilities for Australians to undertake the work and labour market testing requirements, the nature of the work and what skill level is required, the duration of the work, is it non-ongoing and seasonal work as opposed to ongoing permanent work, and the location of the work, noting there are additional incentives and options available for regional employers. We're now going to touch on 3 visa options under the employer-sponsored pathways. The employer-sponsored visas include the Temporary Skills Shortage Visa Subclass 482, the Skilled Employer-Sponsored Regional Provisional Visa Subclass 494, and the Employer-Nominated Scheme Visa Subclass 186. For Australian businesses who want to sponsor an overseas worker to fill an identified vacancy, in the subclasses 482 and 494 visas, generally nominators must show they are an approved sponsor, either a standard business sponsor or party to a labour agreement, that the vacant position is genuine and for the 494 visa is located in a regional area, a nominated occupation from the relevant occupation list or specified in a labour agreement, It's a full-time position available for at least 5 years or the visa duration, and labour market testing has been undertaken. As you can see on the screen, each visa has different requirements. Of note, the subclass 482 visa has no age limit requirement. However, both the subclasses 494 and 186 do. Also, the length of work experience differs between these subclasses. And where you reside is also relevant. As you can see on the subclass 482 visa, you can live anywhere in Australia. However, the subclass 494 states that you must live and work in regional Australia. It is important that employers and visa applicants look at their individual circumstances when applying for a visa and ensure that the applicant meets the visa framework and eligibility requirements. Again, I want to bring your attention to the migration strategy and note that there will be changes to these visas over the coming months and years. However, these are the current visa programs available for employing overseas workers. So what are the visa options for low and semi-skilled workers? The Working Holiday Maker program is a highly used program for low and semi-skilled workers. The Working Holiday Visa subclass 417, which is available to citizens of 19 countries, and the Work and Holiday Visa subclass 462, which is available to citizens of 28 countries. The Working Holiday Maker program allows these visa holders to stay in Australia for 12 months, and working holiday makers may become eligible for a second and third visa if they undertake the required days of specified work in approved industries in specified areas of Australia. Specified work has been expanded to include agriculture, fisheries, mining, tourism and hospitality, construction, bushfire and flood recovery work, and critical COVID-19 work. The PALM scheme enables businesses to recruit workers from 9 Pacific Islands and Timor-Leste to fill unskilled, low-skilled and semi-skilled positions. This scheme is an employer-sponsored program open to all industries in rural and regional Australia, and it offers employers access to a reliable, returning workforce when there is not enough local Australian labour to meet demand. Federal responsibility of the PALM scheme sits with the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, whilst the Pacific Labour Facility manages the day-to-day aspects of the program. The department has a number of labour agreement products available which provide some concessions to the standard visa programs. There are 5 types of labour agreements, being company specific, the designated area migration agreement, the global talent employer sponsored agreement, industry specific agreements and project agreements. Labour agreements enable approved businesses to sponsor skilled overseas workers when they have a workforce shortage that cannot be met by Australian workers or the standard visa programs. And they provide access to subclasses 482, 494 and 186 visa options, which are the 3 we've just spoken about in the previous couple of slides. Labour agreements can provide access to occupations that are not listed on the combined skilled occupation list, or may provide concessions to visa criteria, work experience and age caps. Industry labour agreements, which are for a specific industry with fixed terms and conditions and are set at an industry level with terms and concessions agreed to by the government, are an important one for the horticulture sector. There are currently 10 industry labour agreements available for businesses to access, and these labour agreements provide additional occupations related to the sector and concessions against some of the core visa requirements. This slide has a list of the current labour agreements which are in place today, and you can see about halfway down there is a horticulture industry labour agreement available. Copies of these labour agreements can be found on our website, and each agreement will list the relevant occupations as well as concessions which may be applicable. The Horticulture Industry Labour Agreement, also referred to as the HILA, provides access to 31 occupations and can be used by Australian employers to sponsor overseas workers for the Temporary Skills Shortage Visa, subclass 482, or to sponsor overseas workers for permanent residence under two options. The first option is the Skilled Employer-Sponsored Regional Visa, subclass 494 program, with a pathway to permanent residence after 3 years, or the Employer Nomination Scheme Visa, that's the subclass 186, after a 3 or 4 year transitional period on a temporary skilled shortage visa. 3 years for approved skill level 1 to 3 occupations and 4 years for approved skill level 4 to 5 occupations. The HILA provides access to the following concessions to the standard skilled visa requirements. A concession of up to 10% on the temporary skilled migration income threshold, often referred to as the TSMIT, where it is demonstrated that equivalent Australian workers do not receive annual earnings equal to the TSMIT. A broader range of monetary payments, example regularised overtime and non-monetary benefits such as accommodation, can be counted as guaranteed earnings. English level concessions, and overseas workers can be up to 50 years of age when they apply for an employer nomination scheme or skilled employer-sponsored regional visa programs. A full summary of approved occupations, terms and concessions is available on the department's website. Designated Area Migration Agreements, also known as DARMAs, are a form of labour agreement that sit within the employer-sponsored program and specifically address regional labour market needs. A DARMA is a formal agreement between the Australian Government and a designated area representative, such as a regional, state or territory authority. A DARMA provides flexibility for regions to respond to unique economic and labour market conditions. These agreements may offer concessions for visa criteria such as English language, salary, skills and age requirements. Each agreement has a skilled occupation list specific to that DARMA, which can be varied in accordance with identified labour market needs, and the vacancy must be located within the relevant designated area. A DARMA is a two-tier framework. The first tier consists of an overarching 5-year deed of agreement between the Commonwealth and the designated area representative for the designated region of Australia. The second tier comprises of individual labour agreements with employers using the terms and conditions of the overarching DARMA agreement and endorsement by the designated area representative for the business operating in the region. Labour agreements for businesses under a DARMA utilise the Temporary Skilled Shortage Visa subclass 482, the Skilled Employer-Sponsored Regional Provisional Visa subclass 494, and the Employer Nomination Scheme Visa subclass 186 programs. There are currently 13 DARMAs in place around Australia, and these are listed on the screen. Further information on each of these DARMAs can be located on the department's website or the relevant designated area representative, all of which are listed on the screen. Labour market testing is mandatory for the Temporary Skills Shortage Visa subclass 482 and the Skilled Employer-Sponsored Regional Visa subclass 494 nominations. There is no labour market testing requirement for the Employer Nomination Scheme Visa subclass 186, and there are also exemptions where an international trade obligation is in place. For these visa types, you must demonstrate that you cannot find a suitable Australian worker, and if you nominate an overseas worker, you will need to test the local labour market. Labour market testing generally involves advertising the position nationally on at least 2 recruitment websites with a national reach. The position must have been advertised for at least 4 weeks within the 4-month period immediately prior to lodging the nomination application. Advertising of the position must meet a number of requirements which are listed on the screen and are also available on the department's website. Please note that labour market testing is being reviewed under the migration strategy, and you'll need to check the department's website to stay up to date on any future changes in this space. The department is currently running a campaign called Check Twice, Submit Once. As you could imagine, we receive a high volume of visa applications, and processing of these can take longer if an application contains incorrect information or documents are missing. Encouraging visa applicants to submit decision-ready applications will ensure faster processing, decisions and outcomes, and it will definitely minimise delays. Some tips on things to check twice before submitting an application are listed on the screen. I wanted to mention today the Employer Hub, and if you are a business wanting to look into visa options, this page on the department's website is a good place to start. The Employing Overseas Workers Employer Hub is the portal into the different relevant pages a business will use when looking to sponsor an overseas worker. This page includes temporary and permanent visa options, employer-sponsored and independent visa options, and links to other useful information within the website, such as the skilled occupation lists and skill assessment requirements, sponsoring obligations and other relevant information. This is a really useful starting place if you have not previously sponsored overseas workers. Also wanted to mention today the Visa Entitlement Verification Online tool, often referred to as VIVO. For those that may not be aware, the department provides this tool for employers and visa holders to have access to information on their visa conditions and work rights whilst in Australia. To be able to access VIVO, a business must register and have an IMI account. What VIVO can tell you is which visa the person is holding, the expiry date and must not arrive after date of the visa, how long the visa holder can stay or remain in Australia, and what visa conditions are attached to the visa. In other words, what the visa holder can and can't do, including what their work rights are. In Australia, a business or individual is not required to use the services of a registered migration agent. However, if you are looking for immigration advice, it will be best to seek the services of either a legal practitioner or a registered migration agent for this advice. Migration agents play an important part in the process. However, all applications, irrelevant of having a migration agent or not, are processed and managed in the same way. In order to work as a migration agent in Australia, a person must seek formal registration through the Office of the Migration Agents Registration Authority, also referred to as the OMARA. The OMARA sits within the Department of Home Affairs, and whilst they have a broad role, one of their key functions is to maintain a register of registered migration agents within Australia. If you would like to seek the services of a registered migration agent, please go to the OMARA website for further information. We're just going to have a little bit of a look at the strengthening laws to tackle migrant worker exploitation changes that recently came into effect. The National Workplace Relations System has been established for workers in Australia, and it applies regardless of a person's immigration status. It includes the Fair Work Act 2009 and the Fair Work Regulations 2009, which establish a safety net of minimum entitlements and conditions of employment. The Fair Work Commission, which is the independent agency responsible for setting minimum standards under modern awards, and the Fair Work Ombudsman, which is the lead agency for advice, education, compliance and enforcement activities under the Fair Work Act. Changes to the Migration Act 1958 seek to strengthen employer compliance and protect temporary migrant workers from exploitation, including through implementing recommendations 19 and 20 of the 2019 report of the Migrant Workers Task Force. Workplace laws and minimum standards apply to all employers, including third-party providers such as labour hire companies. The Strengthening Employer Compliance Act was passed in Parliament on 7 February 2024. The new legislation seeks to provide a robust legislative framework to enable the Australian Border Force to more effectively address issues of employer non-compliance. There are also complementary measures to encourage temporary migrant workers to report exploitation. So who do these new laws apply to? The new laws apply to employers, labour hire companies and others in the employment chain. The laws protect all migrant workers, including people who have a visa with work rights, an expired visa, and those working in breach of their visa conditions. Types of migrant workers include backpackers, student visa holders, and PALM scheme workers. The legislation establishes 3 new criminal offences to deter employers from using migration rules to exploit temporary migrant workers in the workplace. There are strong penalties for employers who coerce temporary migrants to breach a visa condition, exploit undocumented migrants, or to use a person's temporary visa status to exploit them in the workplace. The Fair Work Ombudsman gives you information on pay rates, shift calculations, leave arrangements, dismissal notices, and redundancy entitlements. See the Pay and Conditions tool on their website. So how can you report another employer or someone else in the labour chain that you think is breaking migrant worker exploitation laws? Well, you can do this confidentially and anonymously through the Fair Work Ombudsman or Border Watch. And if you would like to seek further information on the visa programs or any of the products we've talked about today, you can contact one of our teams via the email addresses on the screen or go to our website, which is also listed on the screen. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for your time. And once again, I'd like to thank Lucy and Alex and the team at AUSVEG for the opportunity to provide this information session today. I know we have covered a lot of information in a short period of time, but hopefully we've provided you with some insights into the migration strategy and, more importantly, an overview of the current visa programs available to employ overseas workers. Just want to mention again that the information I've provided today is valid today. However, we are in a time of rapid change with the migration strategy. So we encourage people to continue to monitor the department's website to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yvette. That was great. There was lots of information in there. If anyone has any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat and I can read them out, or you can also put them in the Q&A as well.
No worries. I might just ask my colleagues Nat and Steve to turn their mics on because they're going to help with the Q&A. And I'll just check with them if we had any Q&A in the chat function or the Q&A function that we weren't able to answer at the time.
Thanks, Yvette. Sorry, Nat, you go.
No. Oh, I was just going to say there's been no questions in the Q&A or
Great.
chat. Steve and I have added some links that might be useful along the way, but we're ready to answer some questions.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, for putting those links in. Appreciate it.
Yes. Now I've got a question for you while people might be thinking of one. AUSVEG, I guess, for want of a better term, are custodians of the Horticulture Industry Labour Agreement, and I know that we talk frequently around the HILA and its utilisations, but do you have any idea on what some of the key occupations that people are utilising the HILA for, Yvette?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't. The 31 occupations are listed on the website, and we can put a link in the chat function to that particular page on the website. I can go to the labour market area and see if they've got some recent statistics on the HILA and see what I can get for you, Lucy, and then you can send that out to those attending.
Excellent. And the other one that I'll probably just touch on, because we also work closely with Vet Assess, and Vet Assess do the skills assessment of the visa applications. They don't do all under the HEALA. I think they do about 16 under the HEALA. But interestingly, when I met with them last week, their top 3 assessments that come through are for forklift drivers, facility supervisors, and machinery or mobile plant operators.
Right.
So that was their 3 top occupations that they assess, and I think their 3 top countries from memory were India, Malaysia, and Taiwan.
Okay.
So
there you go.
Yes.
Some good data there, Lucy.
Yes, it's good to, and interestingly, those Vet Assess skills also align with our recent workforce shortage survey, which also had forklift drivers, mobile plant operators, and supervisors as some of the top jobs as well. Now, I don't know, someone's asked whether the slides will be available, and yes, the slides and the recording will be available. So thank you, Bronwyn, for that one.
Yep, no worries. So just on that though, we're happy to send the slides out, but again, we just need to say that the information does change rapidly. So if you're a business and you're looking to employ an overseas worker, always go to our website first and see what information's on there, because that will have the most up-to-date information. Just for those on the line, I've popped into the chat function a link to the HILA on our website, which will go through a lot more detail than what I talked about today, and it will also list the occupations there. You can also have a look at how many HILAs are currently in place through the search tool on there as well.
Excellent, thank you. Now, employee rights are important. Could you understand time-sensitive nature? Sorry, I'm not quite sure. Sorry, I just can't quite understand that question in the chat. Understand time-sensitive nature. Oh, I understand. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, the fact that information does change regularly.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, yes.
Great.
Yeah. So that's good. Oh. Okay, so the question here is employer rights are important, and you've mentioned the updated compliance measure. Is there somewhere the audit for this is done?
So who asked the question? Bronwyn?
Bronwyn.
What do you mean by audit, Bronwyn?
And would that, I guess, involve the Fair Work? Fair Work often do compliance audits, and they have certainly been assessing some of the key horticultural areas recently.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I don't know, Steve or Nat, if you have a bit of knowledge around workplace ombudsman audits. I know in terms of we have business monitoring and other compliance areas within the Australian Border Force, which sit under the Department of Home Affairs. They have a role in, I guess, monitoring that compliance and ensuring that businesses are doing the right thing. But in terms of an audit, I'm not familiar with that. So Steve or Nat?
Yeah, my understanding, I'm not sure about the audit side of things, but certainly the monitoring of the compliance is definitely an ABF, Australian Border Force function, as part of sponsor monitoring.
Yeah, cool.
And I guess going back to that, you had the QR code there. If anyone does have some concerns, it can be reported through those websites that you put up in that previous slide.
Yeah, so you can report through Border Watch, which is part of the Department of Home Affairs. Look, we sometimes, as well as BIROs, receive emails from businesses, especially if we're connected with them, the business, if we've had engagement with them, I guess just providing information or intel, and we always just forward that through to the Border Watch area or our ABF colleagues who work in that space. So if you can always send them through to us, but probably the best place to go would be either Border Watch or the Workplace Ombudsman Dob-in lines. I just saw somebody asked a question there about providing processing times. Processing times is a hard one in the sense that it would depend on what the visa, it depends on which visa you're asking about. So what I can do, because every visa has a different medium processing time, but what we do have on our department's website, we have a fantastic tool, a processing times tool. And you can go into that tool, and I might just see if Nat or Steve can drop a link to it in the chat while I provide some info on it. Essentially what it does is anyone can go in there and using a drop-down box, you pick which visa you're looking at. So say you're looking at the temporary skill shortage visa, you would pick that, which pathway, and then you put the application date, and you submit that, and straight away the system will show you what the median processing times are for that particular visa in that snapshot. Yeah, so it's probably best to have a look at that tool if you want to have a look at processing times and I guess compare processing times amongst programs, visa programs.
Excellent. Rebecca also asked, can an employee move from one labour agreement to another labour agreement?
People can move from working for one business to another business, yes. That, you know, an employee has the same rights as any other employee, i.e. an Australian. If it's not working out or they want to change employers, they can. They just need to go through the process, and make sure they're doing all the right things through that process, not breaching their visa condition, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so can they go from the horticultural industry labour agreement to the red meat or whatever labour agreement? So they can go and work for someone in the meat industry? As long as they have the yeah.
Well, I'll just let Nat finish. Nat was about to say something first. I'll let you go first, Nat.
Yeah, so with that, if they are changing occupations, they would need both a new visa and a new nomination.
Yeah.
But if they were staying within the same occupation, then and they still had time on their visa, they can go from one employer to another, but they would need a new nomination from the new employer. So if it's under a labour agreement, then yeah, you can go from one labour agreement to another, but that they would require the new employer to sponsor them under the labour agreement. Or if they had an occupation that was part of, for example, a Dharma, they could get sponsored through that as well. So they're not limited. They can move from one to the other, but they would need to get that new nomination.
Okay. So that would be the case. So just for instance, you were a forklift driver that came in on a horticultural industry labour agreement, but you wanted to be a forklift driver in the meat industry. I guess it's still the same skills assessment, but your employee would need to sponsor you.
Yep. I don't know if forklift drivers are on that meat industry labour agreement, though. They may not be. So you can change, yes, as Nat said, as long as you've got the skill level requirements for the occupation and it's on the relevant labour agreement or Dharma or whichever it is, you can change, yes.
Excellent. And I'm reading, I know Alex has put a message in there please put the questions in the Q&A. I know I'm still reading some in the chat. But there's one here going, what is the requirement of skills assessment for non-ANSCO occupations under the HELA?
Oh, that's a very technical question for me to answer. I actually don't know the answer to that. So I'm going to see if Steve does. Yeah, I thought Steve would. He's very technical, this guy. That's why I brought him along. Because I knew he would
be. You're being optimistic.
Well, I knew he does know a lot more than me. So Steve, over to you.
Yeah, look, probably the most straightforward answer to that one is the skills assessment is going to vary depending on the occupation that the person's applying for the visa for. So if it's like a trades occupation, they would go through Trades Recognition Australia. If it was like an engineering occupation, they'd go through Engineers Australia, so on and so forth. So it really does vary depending on the nature of the occupation. For those that are under the HELA, some will require a skills assessment, some may not. Depends on the level of skill required.
Yeah, thank you. Bronwyn's followed up around the palm workers, and Bronwyn, I'll take that one on notice because I can also raise that in actually more specifically the palm working groups, etc. that I'm on. But I know as from an AUSVEG perspective, that's certainly something that we raise continually. And I was in Canberra this week and also followed up on that conversation. So we're certainly aware of those. Now I'm going to be good to, oh, hang on, sorry, there's this one here. Is there help for more Victorian regional areas employing WHN, working holiday visa holders in the hospitality industry over the holiday season? Oh, that one's, not sure about that one. Peter?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, Peter. I think, what we do know about working holiday makers is that they have returned to pre-COVID levels, which is great. We also know that they're a great workforce in the hospitality sector. And in terms of, I guess, promoting a region, it's not something that a specific region for working holiday makers. It's not something that the Department of Home Affairs actually do. But yeah, I'm not really sure how else I can answer that. Yeah, sorry.
Peter, I might just quickly jump in and just say there's probably a number of hospitality specific recruitment agencies that would probably look to have a range of working holiday makers on their books. So that's one option. I know here in Western Australia, for example, the WA government does a matching service where there is employers can register on a migrant register to be matched with employees or visa holders, but that's very specific to WA. The only other suggestion I'd probably make there is Australian Hotels Association going through them. They may have a ready-made workforce as well, but that's just a few options to throw out.
Yes, and thanks for that, Steve. And Peter, I'd probably suggest that you do get in contact with the AHA. We have been working with the AHA around the working holiday maker migration review. So we both understand how important working holiday makers are in regional areas of Australia. So I'd suggest maybe that would be a good place to go to as well. There's one here as well. Are visa approvals limited by quotas? If so, what ratio of applications are refused due to quotas?
So, Lucy, I might. Do you want to take that a bit, or do you want me to?
No, you go. That's fine.
Okay. So simple answer to that one, Paul, is temporary visas are not capped. So if you're looking at a 482, 494 program, there is no cap on those. The permanent migration program, however, so if we're talking employer nomination scheme, permanent visa outcomes, yes, there is a migration program limit of 185,000 for this program year, but that's only the permanent visa streams. Temporary visa streams are not capped at all.
If I can just add that a visa wouldn't be refused because of the cap. It would just be held over till the new caps open in the following financial year or planning year.
And visas are generally refused because they don't meet the criteria, not because of any quota or cap number.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now I've been good and got back onto the Q&A. We have a question here. Could you please provide the phone contact numbers for BIRO in Brisbane?
Yes, I'll pop it in the chat now.
Excellent. Then we've got, hi Vet, you mentioned some new pathway visas coming later this year. Are they replacing current pathways or will they be in addition to the current ones?
So what I mentioned was the skills in demand visa. That should come out in the next few months or by the end of the year or early next year. That will replace the current temporary skilled shortage visa. So I did speak a lot about that visa, the temporary skilled shortage visa, in today's session. It's basically going to replace that. The skills in demand visa will have 3 pathways. There'll be a specialist pathway, which the main, I guess, criteria for that is that the position needs to be minimum income of $135,000. The core skills pathway will sort of essentially be what the current TSS is, and that will have the normal requirements like be on the core skilled occupation list, meet the income threshold requirement, etc., etc. And then the third tier or pathway will be the essential skills pathway, and that pathway is where things like what we know is that pathway is where things like DARMAs and the labour agreements will sort of sit in there. So those concessional products that are available.
Excellent. Thank you. I would like to ask about the agricultural visa for Vietnam. Is there a list of companies which can sponsor from Vietnam? And I think that's the pilot one.
Yeah, the MOU. So funny you asked that, because I was asked that about this yesterday. And I'm still following up further information on it, so I don't have a response for you on it at this stage, but I don't know if Steve or Nat have any further information on that, the MOU, Vietnam MOU.
No, I
I've
don't.
heard nothing. No.
Yeah, so we'll have to take that one on notice. I'm just going to write it down.
What I'll do, Rick, I will respond to this by putting my email address in here as well. And you can email me and I can forward them on. So for anyone else, it's lucy.greg@ausveg.com.au, but I've put that in the chat as well. Now, apart from advertising the job position with the 2 national advertiser recruiters, what other evidence do you need to provide in your visa application that shows the job seekers that applied in Australia are not suitable?
With the labour market testing, it might just be easier if we drop a link. So those requirements were listed on the screen, but might be easier if we just drop a link to labour market testing pages on the website, which actually details them. So we'll do that.
I'll do that.
Thanks, Nat.
And I guess, Liz put this one in, and I guess it follows on from a similar conversation I had with a grower a couple of weeks ago. You get 15 or 20 applications from Australia, but when you go through it, none of them actually meet the minimum requirements for the job. Does the website also explain how you can actually, outline the fact that although you had 20 applicants, none of them were suitable?
We'd have to have a look at what the website details around labour market testing, but it does list what the evidence required to provide for the labour market testing visa criteria.
Okay.
But I don't know off the top of my head, put it that way. But it does list it substantially on the website.
Excellent. Okay, just that one. I assume if they are making the changes, there are still a new round of costs. If so, it'll be very expensive change. So will all the parties need to be wary?
So you're asking about visa application charges and sponsorship charges, etc., changing in line with the migration strategy and new visas. Have no idea. There's no comms around visa application or sponsor charges at this stage under any new visas that are coming into play. Yeah, so in terms of if there are changes to the current visa application charges, again, they'll just be made available once the visa themselves become available. I haven't heard anything on visa charges anyway changing. Just Nat and Steve, you guys haven't heard anything?
No.
No.
Generally only 1st of July, to my understanding.
Okay. So further to the BIRO contact in Brisbane, we also have a request here for the BIRO contact phone number for WA as well.
All right, I'm in the directory, Steve, so I'll grab your number and chuck it in there.
Sure, thank you.
No worries.
Okay. Tricia, what is the advantage of a DAMA versus other options? To make changes, you must each time there is a cost. Hang on. Sorry. Whoops. I just got this. What is the advantage? To make any changes, you must each time to change at a cost of approximately $5,000 by the migration agents after having already paid $15,000 or so for the initial one. Can this be changed? Can you make advise of needs for the year that you don't get hit with another round of costs or information?
I might need to read the question myself, Lucy. I think I've lost the gist of what it's asking because there's a lot in there. Is that in the Q&A or the chat function?
It's in the Q&A. Tricia, once again, I'll put my email address in, and then you might like to expand on it, and I can send directly to the BIRO team, and maybe just put your state, which state you're in as well, because when I send it to a vet, you'll know also where it can go to.
So in terms of the first question on that, there's a few different things in Tricia's question, but the first question around what's the difference or the advantage of a DAMA versus other options. So essentially, a DAMA and a labour agreement, or the HILA, they're essentially the same product, but the HILA is an industry-specific product. You can be anywhere in Australia to apply for that, or the business can be, whereas a DAMA is not industry specific, so there'll be lots of occupations on that DAMA. Some of them may be specific to horticulture, but the position must be in the designated area of that particular DAMA, and that's based on postcodes. And just to give you a bit of an example of that, if you're not familiar with DAMAs and it's all sort of sounding a little bit confusing, there is a DAMA, for example, in Far North Queensland, and it's run out of the Cairns Chamber of Commerce. And to access that DAMA, the business and the job must be located in the designated area of that particular DAMA by occupation. So that DAMA covers Cairns right out to the border and everywhere, all up to the top of the north. So as long as the occupation is in that region, you can access occupations on that particular DAMA. So that's the difference between a DAMA and a industry labour agreement. An industry labour agreement doesn't have designated areas as such. It's more about focusing on an industry sector, whereas a DAMA can list occupations of lots of different industry sectors, but it has to be in that relevant designated area. DAMAs will often have a lot more occupations available than an industry labour agreement, because it's covering lots of different industry sectors. Does that make sense? So I hope that explains a little bit more the difference between a DAMA and an industry labour agreement, but they are both labour agreements.
Yeah. We have some growers which have DAMAs over healers, and that's because they happen to be in a DAMA region, but they want to employ people which are outside of the occupations in the healer, the 31. So for instance, some finance admin, HR in some of those roles, which is certainly not in the horticulture industry labour agreement, and it just makes it easier for them to have one one scheme rather than trying to manage healer and DAMA. It just makes it easier. And most of the DARMAs that I've seen include things like forklift drivers and things like that. So some of those basic roles I've seen to be typically in some of the DARMAs, but obviously it would depend from region to region, I'm presuming.
Yep. And what we can do with the DARMAs, if there's a business online today that wants to have a look to see if there's a DARMA that may be available to you, I can just drop into the chat box a link to the page on our website that has a hyperlink to every one of the DARMA or the area, the people, the responsibility or the business that looks after the DARMA. And that way you can have a look at whether there's one in your region.
Excellent. And while you're doing that, Yvette, I've got a question here. Do you have any updates on the business visas, which were 188 and 132? And will they be replaced by the new talent and innovation visa?
Yvette, I might take that one if that's okay.
Yes.
Subclass 188, the business innovation investment visa ceased to exist, does not exist anymore. It is, yes, being replaced or merged with the Global Talent Program into the new National Innovation Visa, or NIV for short. That we don't have a date on release, but we're expecting late 24, early 25 for that National Innovation Visa to be released, probably around a similar sort of time frame for skills in demand. But yes, the short answer is, whilst the BIP program doesn't exist anymore, that will be merged into the new National Innovation Visa.
Excellent. And just one last question, because we've run out of time, but I guess the development of a new DARMA is up to it. They're lodged by the actual region, aren't they?
They are, but what I will say on DARMAs, and I don't mean to interrupt you there, Lucy, but the department, under the migration strategy, the department is currently not accepting new applications for DARMAs. You can still apply for a visa under a current DARMA, but we're not accepting applications for new DARMAs as such. Under the migration strategy as well, our previous minister made it quite clear that we were moving more towards state-based DARMAs as opposed to those smaller regional ones. But that's all. None of that's been confirmed through the strategy as yet. But in terms of DARMAs are still available, or under the current 13 DARMAs that are listed on our website, and I've just dropped the link in the chat box, but new DARMAs are not available for designated areas at this stage.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yvette. I'm sorry, everyone, we will need to wrap it up, but as I say, those phone numbers are in the chat if you wanted it. If you go there, you can see Yvette's number and Steve's number. Steve's in WA and Yvette's in Brisbane. So don't hesitate to reach out. And you can contact me as well, and I'm happy to send them on to Yvette, noting that that BIRO Queensland is the, I'm probably not using the right language here, but you are the ones heading up the agricultural unit within BIRO.
That's right, yeah. So we're the national lead for the agriculture sector in that business, industry and regional outreach space.
So thank you very much, Yvette, Steve and Natalie. We do appreciate your input today. And thank you everyone for attending. And don't hesitate to reach out. And as further information becomes available, we will certainly keep our industry abreast of all those changes.
And don't forget the consultation on Tuesday. Register to attend so you can have a voice into that working holiday maker and the regional settings consultations.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Bye.
Bye.